So a brief agenda of kind of what the next 90 minutes is going to look like. A brief introduction and kind of laying the land for who we are, why we're doing this, and some of the outcomes and goals we're looking to achieve through this presentation. We'll then briefly touch on the player pathway, just to provide some context to everybody in terms of where everything stands. And then we'll really get into the heart of the presentation, which is the philosophy document itself. This is quite a dense document, and there's a lot of information in it. We're certainly not going to get to all of it or most of it today, but we will go through everything and touch on it and review it for you. At the end too, we'll go over some resources that we've compiled from a variety of different areas. And provide those to everyone on the call, so you guys have some takeaways to kind of further your development and dig into some content over the next little while. And then finally, at the end, we'll leave some room for questions and potentially some discussion. If there's any questions that require a bit of dialogue, then I can certainly unmute individuals' mics and we can engage that way. So again, just a bit of a brief introduction in terms of who we are and what we do. So I'll kind of kick it off. I think most people on the call, but for those I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name's Sean Medeiros. I'm the high performance coordinator at Rugby Ontario. I've been involved at Rugby Ontario since about 2015. Started off as an intern when I was finishing up my master's degree, and then was lucky enough to secure a full-time role in high performance once I completed my degree. Over the past 3 years, I've been working, Con and I have been working hand in hand in the high performance section of Rugby Ontario, the Ontario Blues. And my role certainly changed and evolved over the past 5 years. Primarily what I focus on now and dedicate my time and effort to within the organization is really doing everything off the field to set up our athletes and coaches for the most success on the field. So that's really looking at structures of programming, logistics, planning camps, tours, and things of that nature. Budget's obviously a big component of what I focus on, trying to make the program affordable and valuable to athletes. But that's really where I focus my time and energy is really dialing in and creating an environment for success for our athletes and coaches. Con, I'll turn it over to you to chat about yourself.
Hi guys, Paul Conley, ex-high school teacher at Uxbridge Secondary School. I've been in the provincial program as a coach since 1997, Canada Juniors, Ontario Senior Blues, and presently the Oshawa Vikings men's coach. Now, the thing I really like is that I'm a club guy and that I've worked with the rugby club, the Oshawa Vikings and Brock Rugby Club my whole life. A variety of age groups from minis all the way up to U18s. My role now is I would really like to move into working with teams and coaches in high performance and taking a top-down approach to take our content, what Canada's doing, what the best nations in the world are doing, and delivering it to our clubs in high school, coaches, and athletes so that we can perform better at the World Cup level. So really looking forward to tonight, and I'll hand it back over to Sean.
Thanks, Con. So again, just looking at our goals and objectives for today, there's really 3 key outcomes we're kind of looking for after this 90-minute session. First and foremost is to provide everybody in attendance with an understanding of the document that we're going to review. Again, like I said, there's a ton of information, a ton of detail in this document. And we're obviously not going to get to all of it, but our goal is to review the document and to make it as accessible as possible to everybody so that when we send this to you and when we put this on the website, it's easy to navigate, it's easy to find what you're looking for. We've certainly done our best ahead of time to craft the document in a way that is accessible, but this allows us the opportunity to kind of review our philosophy and how we've put it together. The second point there is just, again, to provide transparency and clarity in our approach. So we really feel that if we're aligned from top to bottom, like Con said, and everybody has an understanding of what we're trying to achieve, then we're only going to be stronger as a province and as a nation. So that's what we're trying to get at through the development of this document and through the ongoing dialogue that's going to occur as a result of this document. And then three, just to provide some actual takeaways for everybody today. So like I've said, we've provided a variety of different resources, different webinars, different YouTube videos, different websites that everybody can visit to kind of look at different content and different ways people are doing things. So again, you can kind of leave this presentation and have something to walk away with to upskill your coaching or even reaffirm what you're already doing. And again, the line there at the bottom, one team, one approach, really speaks to what we're trying to achieve here through providing that transparency and clarity in what we're doing. If we get everybody working really hard and driving in the same direction, then there's certainly no limit to what we can do as a province and as a country. So what's on the screen here is just a snapshot of the Ontario Player Pathway. On the left-hand side of the screen is the boys and men's pathway. On the right-hand side is the girls and women's pathway. We just thought it was important to address from the jump, because again, when we talk about clarity and transparency, I think there's a period of time when a snapshot like this didn't exist, and there was a lot of questions in the minds of players and even coaches in terms of, you know, if I have these goals in mind, well, what do I need to do to achieve them? So part of what we're doing is creating that understanding and creating that clarity and transparency so that athletes are aware of, okay, if my goal is to make Canada U18 and I'm a 16-year-old boy, well, okay, here's the pathway. This is what I need to benchmark. This is what I need to do that. And obviously clubs and high schools play a massive role in that. As you can see there, high schools represent, you know, I would say probably about 90% of the entry points for most of our players in grade 9, and then obviously clubs throughout the entire process. So again, just putting this document forward so that there's clarity, and this is something that exists on the Rugby Ontario website that we certainly encourage everybody to share with their players and athletes so that there's an understanding in the community of what they need to do if they want to achieve their goals. So development philosophy. So just before we dive in again to the meat of the presentation and the meat of the document, we felt it'd be good to provide just some general context. So some basic questions. Why? Why would we build a philosophy document, or why would we do something like this? And again, I'm going to say the word a lot throughout the presentation. It's just clarity and transparency. We feel that by producing a document like this, then it just puts the outcomes out there for everybody to see, everybody to understand, and really opens the door to a lot of those discussions that can then occur. Everybody will see what we're doing, why we're doing it, and then we'll have the opportunity to discuss it, review it, implement it, or adapt it in their own coaching delivery. Who's it designed for? So again, when we crafted this document, we really crafted it with the intention that it would be accessible to anybody. So whether you're a first-year high school teacher stepping onto the rugby field to help supervise a program, or a 30-year veteran coach of a club, we've really tried to make this accessible for everybody. And certainly if you're newer to rugby, there's going to be a lot more in here for you to dive into and review. But again, if you're a veteran, there's a lot of a really good content in here, a lot of best practices and things that you can review to, again, potentially reaffirm what you're already doing, or to challenge what you're doing right now and potentially adopt some of the things we are into your own coaching practices and delivery. The big thing I think that's important to say, and it kind of ties into the next point, is, you know, but by no means are we saying this is the be all end all of rugby. Rugby is a dynamic sport. There's a ton of different ways to play it. There's a ton of great ways to play it. And there's a ton of different ways to coach and deliver it. So we're not saying, again, this is the be all end all and this is the script and you got to go back to your club or high school and read and repeat everything we're doing here. It's just simply what we're doing, what we've found to be the best practices from the different resources we've compiled through Rugby Canada, different professional sides, different unions. It's what we found to be the best practices that work for us at the provincial level, and that we do feel will work across the province at all levels. So I think that's important to keep in mind, especially when we talk about the development process versus the development outcome. Again, everybody's process is unique, and and their own, and influenced by different factors. So by no means are we saying you must walk away and be a carbon copy of this document. No, this document is just there to give you the outcomes that we're looking for at the provincial level if you have an athlete who's trying to make the provincial team. So you can take those outcomes and adopt them into your approach and your philosophy and your delivery. So just a brief overview here. The Rugby Ontario development model has been established to support coaches and players in their continued growth as they aspire to play the game of rugby at the international level. So simply put, this document again is to provide resources to coaches and players who are trying to aspire to play for Canada. We've looked at a variety of different models, different frameworks, different practices that are used around the world. And from that, we've pulled together, again, what we feel is the best practices for our demographic, for our population, and what works best for us. The aims for Rugby Ontario, so again, the outcomes we're looking for, to develop the game of rugby in Canada by improving the technical and tactical aspects of players and coaches. Again, we want to provide consistent structures of programming, technical terminology, and messaging through our age grade pathways. If we can provide a consistent message to players and coaches that's consistently reaffirmed at all levels of the game, then we're going to be producing athletes who are light years ahead of where they would be otherwise. If we're constantly reteaching athletes and they're constantly relearning different skills at different levels, then it's certainly a much more difficult task as a player to adapt and to learn, but as a coach too, to have to consistently build players back up or tweak and change things. So we feel by a consistent approach, we're going to do much better by the athletes. And like it says right there, the real core of this program or this philosophy, and the core of everything that we do at the Ontario Blues program is got to be player-centered, development-driven, and competition-supported, and it's got to be in that order. The player has to be at the core of everything we do in our delivery, and we have to be creating an environment that drives their development, and competition's a massive, massive part of that. So this slide here obviously contains a lot of information, a lot of really good information. And unfortunately, obviously, given the time of our presentation today, we won't be able to dive into it all fully and completely, but we will be able to kind of discuss some of these key points and review this as a whole. And what we've kind of done here in creating this specific page to the document is really create the foundation of our coaching and the foundation of our coaching principles and delivery that we want to establish at the provincial level. So starting with effective principles, these are obviously the key foundational points to any program, to any type of coaching delivery that we want to achieve. If we have strong principles in place and we're consistent with the delivery of our principles across various applications and whatever we're coaching, we're already off to a really good start. And it's really important that when we're developing these principles, we keep a couple key points in mind. First and foremost is creating a positive learning environment. Rugby must be fun, it must be enjoyable. Otherwise, we're going to turn athletes away and it's not going to be a pleasant experience for them. And at the end of the day, like we said, everything we do is player-centered. So we have to have the athlete and the player as the focus of what we're doing, and we need to make sure that it's fun for them. Otherwise, they're not going to learn, they're not going to get better. The second key point here is using game-related practices to support core skill development. We don't want to be developing these core skills in self-isolation. It's critical that we're developing these skills in a way in which the athlete will be able to apply them in-game. Otherwise, this development is really useless. So it's really important that we're creating an environment in practice and using gameplay in practice to develop these skills, so that when an athlete does need to rely on these skills in a game, it's a more seamless transition, and they're better prepared for that transition and performance of their skills. The next point here is promoting adaptive play by challenging the players. So reinforcing positive behaviors. This part is critical to keeping athletes engaged. If we're simply just creating an environment in which the athlete can show up, perform the skill seamlessly, and go home, they're not going to be getting better. They're not going to be engaged. They're going to switch off. So we have to make sure that through our game-based drills and practices that were challenging the athletes and applying various forms of pressure. And they're going to fail, and it's okay that they fail. But when they do fail, it's important that we're consistently reinforcing those positive behaviors. And through that, they'll continue to get better and they'll continue to improve. The last 2 points underneath these effective coaching principles is the mastery coaching approach and the long-term player development focus. And these two kind of go hand in hand in the sense that we're really focusing on the process over the outcome. So while we're providing you with the outcomes here today that we're looking for players at the provincial level, it's really the process that's at the foundation of achieving these outcomes. Without a strong process in place, we're not going to be able to achieve the desired outcomes that we're looking for. And through reinforcing the process, that's how we're going to develop these athletes. And again, that plays into the long-term player development focus that we're striving for here. We're not just looking for these shortcuts, these quick fixes that are going to get our athletes to the next level right away. We're really looking to develop a lifelong player. So starting at grassroots, building them up through the club, the high school, provincial, national level, but then creating an environment in which they're happy and they're enjoying rugby, so that even when they're done playing at the professional level or the national level, they come back to the club and they're in a position to give back and continue. So it's really through that long-term player development focus that we can achieve something like that. So when we talk about our effective coaching principles, again, these are the foundational pieces of our coaching, and these are things that while we may tweak and change over time, for the most part, they're going to remain consistent. When we look at the next area and we look at training objectives, these are more tailored towards specific training sessions and how we break up the season or the year in terms of how we're delivering content and coaching our players. So here we have it broken up into a pretty simple acronym: CARE, concept, action, reflect, review, and evidence. And this is the kind of process that as a coach, we're pushing our coaches to go through. So when we start with concept, here we're talking about a detailed yearly training plan and established philosophy. And this is what we've done at the provincial level here, obviously through the development of this document and our development philosophy, but also putting in place a yearly training plan. So understanding that at which stages of the year, where we want to have our athletes in terms of their development, where we're building them up, where we're looking for them to peak, where we're focusing on development over performance. And having clarity around this piece is critical in terms of the delivery and consistency as coaches, making sure everybody's on the same page in terms of how we're approaching the athletes and really what we're prioritizing in terms of our development of the athletes at certain times of the year and at certain training sessions within a season. The next bit here is action. And so that's enhancing the training environment. Detail and preparation, execution, and delivery. This is obviously critical in terms of what we're looking to achieve. We don't want to be in a situation where we're showing up to a training session and we're unclear about what we're trying to deliver that day, or we're unclear about the KPIs that we're trying to hit in a session. So it's critical that our coaches are arriving, they're prepared, there's clarity amongst the staff in terms of what they're executing and what they're delivering. And through that process, it's going to be a much better session for not only the coaches, but the players, because again, as we all know, the players are going to be aware of that, and they can tell when it's a really switched on session and when we're kind of just flying by the seat of our pants. The next bit here is reflect and review, and this again is another critical component here, and this can be done through a variety of different mechanisms and platforms, IPPs, video review, one-on-ones with players, and even amongst coaches. And this is where we're using these tools and using this feedback process to understand and reaffirm what we're trying to teach to the athlete, and also getting insights from the athlete's perspective, understanding what they viewed the positives of the session or what they took away from the session. And then through this discussion, through this dialogue, you can reassess what you're delivering as a coach and make tweaks through the next training session. So it's obviously important that this reflect and review process not only happens between coaches at the end of a session, but that there's integration between the players as well to make sure that their voice is heard and that there's an understanding of their perception of the session. And the final bit here in terms of training objectives is evidence. So testing, video, data, obviously depending on the type of program you're running, the access you have to different resources, this type of evidence is going to change for each coach. But again, it's really just about maximizing the available resources you have, whether that's through strength and conditioning testing, video review, or tracking various data points that an athlete might engage in over the course of a game or a practice or a session. So monitoring contact or miles run or various other data points. And when we put all of these components together, that's how we really create a strong environment for the athletes. As we look to continue to build through the themes discussed on this page, starting with obviously effective coaching principles as the foundation, then we get into the training objectives built on top of that. And now we look at the training environment, which is critical to the delivery and the learning of an athlete at any given session. So when we talk about the training environment, we're talking about the type of session that we're creating, what we're surrounding the athletes with that's going to enable them to have a positive session and allow them to walk away having learned as much as possible and gotten better. So when we talk about common framework and languages, this is again where we circle back to the foundation and the importance of having a strong understanding as coaches of what our principles are and making sure that we're consistent in the integration of those principles into our training sessions. And using consistent language can be a really powerful tool in this, and reiterating that to the athletes and really driving that piece home to them. Consistency and expectations for the group's behaviors in training and gameplay. So again, this is where we kind of circle back and talk about reinforcing positive behaviors. So making sure we're consistent in that, and that even if a session or a drill or a game doesn't come off as you had hoped, that we're still positive in reaffirming the positive behaviors that we're looking for when they are displayed by an athlete. Coach and athlete working together, player-led and organized unit and subunit leadership. So this is when we talk about giving some onus to the players and creating an environment in which they feel empowered and that they feel like they're contributing to the growth of the team and the development of the team. So leaning on these players to be leaders and to guide their peers and to drive the development amongst each other. Another important piece here that we'll talk about too is the different types of learners. So understanding and creating an environment that can empower different types of learners. So whether they're visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, whether they learn through reading and writing, kind of creating a well-rounded environment that can apply to each of these athletes. And in order to do this, you have to have a really strong understanding of your players. So learning from them, talking to them, understanding the ways in which they learn. Would they be better served with a PowerPoint detailing the session, or would they rather be would they be better served with a PowerPoint guiding the session, or would they be better off walking through a session on the field and seeing it that way, or even bullet points, a small write-up of the session or the KPIs that we're looking for. There's different ways that we can engage these athletes. And again, it's critical that we understand the ways in which they learn best to achieve that. Establishing a growth mindset amongst our players is very important as well. We want to make sure that we're driving players to always strive to attain more, to improve their game play, and to never feel satisfied in what they've done. Obviously, there's opportunities to reflect for these athletes and to be happy with what they've accomplished, but they should always be motivated to drive forward and push their boundaries and grow as a player that way. The bit we have bolded here at the bottom as well is challenge the players with why. So creating an environment in which the players feel comfortable that they can be challenged with that question. Why are you doing this? Why are we doing this as a team? That's critically important to player development as well. It's all well and good if a player knows how and when to do something, but it's most important if they know why they're doing it. If they understand that why, then they can really gain that next level of understanding, and that really takes their game to the next level. So it's really important that as coaches, we're always asking the players why, and we're not just telling them, we're pulling that information for them. And sometimes it's obviously not going to be easy. Sometimes a player might not know why they're doing something. So it's important that as coaches, we leave that opportunity of uncertainty, and we don't just answer it for them. We let them sit with it, and we let them think and reflect on it, and then work with them to gain that understanding, as opposed to just pushing it out there to them. So this next slide here is the philosophy as provided by Rugby Canada. And really this sums up a lot of what was talked about on that last slide. And simply put, the philosophy as provided by Rugby Canada is that every player needs to be able to execute the foundational abilities consistently to have the potential of playing rugby at an elite level. So it's not just a matter of being able to excel in one or two of these areas sporadically. It's about creating an environment in which athletes can learn and develop their skills to a point in which they can perform a variety of these skills consistently under pressure. And as we talked about before, rugby is such a dynamic game. It's such a chaotic game that in order for athletes to be able to consistently perform these skills at a very high level, we have to be putting them in environments in training where they're asked to perform these skills under a wide range of pressures, and that those pressures are changing, and that the environment and the pictures that they're training in are consistently changing, so that they have to adapt the execution of those skills to match those varying pressures. If we're just developing these drills in isolation and in static situations, then when we're asking these players to perform them under pressure, they're not going to be well equipped to do it. And chances are they're not going to be able to perform optimally in that situation. It's really important that as coaches, we understand that in our practice design, and that we're creating sessions, we're creating environments based on our principles and utilizing our objectives that will really create different drills, create different gameplays that ask that of the players and challenge the players in that way. And the last point here on this slide in terms of the Rugby Canada philosophy is that if we're simply going to ask players to perform these skills consistently, then we have to make sure that we're consistently practicing these skills with the players, and that we're consistently asking them to perform them under a variety of skills. It's not simply enough to touch on these core skills every once in a while. It's got to be a foundational component of all of our training sessions. So here's where I'll turn it over to Con, and we can get into discussing more specifics and talking about the principles of play.
Right, coaches. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at different core principles in a variety of areas of the game. So we're going to take a whole approach. I'm going to present the whole now, and I want you to think in your mind, how do you want your teams to play rugby? So over the years, I know many of you here, we've had conversations talking about how our teams play, how they execute. When we watch World Cups, what teams really stand out to us. And in my mind, and in conversation with our provincial coaches, we feel that we have a very strong ideal about how we want Ontario Blues to play in rugby. And if they play to this level and we continue to develop them, as Gethin Watts always said to me, a strong Ontario means a strong Canada. So that's our big goal. I'm going to take you through a variety of areas now, and we're going to have some video support so that we can look at it and see what it looks like at the top level. Remember, we always want to set the bar high with our athletes, and you should do that as a coach as well. So you need to set the bar high for yourself and work really hard at detail planning. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Sean. So foundations of play. Right away, we've seen this for years in rugby. The big thing for me is applying pressure. And that occurs on both the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. Now, how you apply that pressure goes into how you play the game. And then when you decide how you want to play the game, then you're going to work on the nuts and bolts to develop those athletes, which Sean will take us through in a few minutes. And then we'll bring it back to what the whole part session looks like. So let's always keep the foundations of play in mind. Next slide, Sean. Now let's look at phase play attack first. Now, guys and ladies, a lot of information here. And again, you'll have this resource. What I would suggest you do is this resource stays at home in your work area, and you always go back to it. But you'll see when we do our session plans, we're going to have a smaller resource that would stay on your clipboard that is kind of information at a glance. But if we look at core principles and phase play attack for Rugby Ontario, this is how we want our teams to play. Close to the defensive line in order to take away line speed. We always say to our athletes, back yourself. What a big coachable for me is I say to my athlete, if they have the ball in their hand, if they don't hear anything, they're on their own. It's time to play rugby, beat people with footwork, right? Grubber through, chip over, whatever you need to do. Have the confidence in yourself. When we're playing in phase play attack, and as we'll see in everything with regards to our core principles, behavior is fueled by early and accurate communication. We have to demand this from our players. And then rugby IQ, roles and responsibilities, how we run hard lines. How do we play good phase play rugby? It's best if we don't set up a breakdown, because if they set up a breakdown, now we're going against a flatline defense that might have 13 people on their feet. It's best if we can keep the ball off the ground if possible. But if we do go to breakdown, we have to be clinical at that breakdown. Threat focus, not ball focus. We have to have the ability to attack off 9 and 10, 2 waves in attack, options off both sides of the ruck. And then if we do attack wide and we run out of space on the touch line, what does that regeneration of attack look like? Counterattack, a big joke with me is we'll watch a team counterattack and the people covering the game will go, oh, what vision, amazing decision making on the fly. But as coaches, we know that at practice, we've put our athletes in that situation 100 times so that we've painted that picture, and then when it occurs in a game, they have something to fall back on. Ability to manage game situations in an effective manner. What does that look like? Creating or relieving pressure, slow ball, fast ball, and then kicking options in game play. Positive, negative game balance, and then exits and red zone strategies. So all this in phase play attack, we have to have an idea of what we're trying to achieve, and then that's how we design our practices to work towards it. Let's go and look at some examples here in gameplay. Just let it play right through, Sean, and I'll chat as we go. So first off, we're looking at footwork, dynamic footwork, aggressive through the contact area, support players communicating, and then things like this when we're on the ground, working hard on the ground. And in our document, we'll talk about these areas of the game and we'll continue to break through it. But again, video is such a strong tool for athletes. The ability to play through phases, communication. But again, this doesn't just happen. We have to have an idea of how we want to play and then work towards it. Our work at contact situations. Our reorganizing, how's that for a clear out? Hey, Mike Kern's very excited right now looking at this. Options off both sides of the ruck. This is the way we want to play rugby. This is dynamic, it's physical, small skill sets, right? And then as they state there, old school stuff. But this would be setting the bar high for our athletes. This is what it looks like. This is what we're trying to achieve. And again, that's a clean out. Bodies on the ground. Notice our structure coming off the sideline. They know what shape they want to get into, and they know how they're going to play off it. Again, attacking both sides of the ruck, meaning the defense can't just fold around and defend. So in our document, we look at these areas, and then we provide resources on how you can coach them up. But again, I watch this and I get excited because this is what good rugby looks like. All right, so again, keeping in that attack mode, now we're looking at transitional attack. And a phrase I'd like you to really focus on is reload, because that term in rugby, especially going from defense to attack or attack to defense, is how hard our athletes are working to reset, right? Big, back in game. And these are things we can work on and teach in practice, developing that attitude in our players about how hard they need to work and just continuing to work to achieve their goals. Now again, transitional attack, ability to reload, get in their shape, create options off both sides of the ruck, ability to organize, regenerate, counterattack. And we're looking at kick counter, turnover ball at breakdown, or situational like overthrows and lineouts, bent arm, etc. Then what do we do from that? We can attack, or kicking can also be an option, to touch, to space, or contestable. And again, our athletes needing to know when, how, what this looks like through communication. So remember, it's important that we work on transition and attack in an effort to develop muscle memory for the athlete for a variety of situations. Let's take a look at some options here. This is our own Toronto Arrows, and a lot of really good rugby in this clip. Now, as coaches, big thing, we always want to question our athletes. Why are these, like, what are our back three? What did they do well in this situation? What are our centers looking to do? Go ahead, Sean. So we get a kick from their goal line. And you can see right away, communication has occurred. Dan Moore coming around. Centers working hard off the ball to get in good support lines. And then it's try time. Now look at that try, and outstanding work, excellent vision. All of my provincial coaches and all of the national team coaches have ran through that situation 50 times. The communication would have came from outside in, and they would have communicated away, an attack away from where the ball was kicked. Dan Moore heard that communication, fullback took it. You can go to the next slide, Sean. And then Dan just worked around that fullback, the centers pulled back, and then we continued to play off it. Then we go to structured attack. So looking at scrum, line out, exit strategies, understanding options, how we're gonna play off these. But as we all know from the World Cup final, it all starts at the set piece. So we have to work with our athletes on their core skill development to be good scrummagers, to be good in the line out, to have an understanding of what they're trying to achieve. When we saw England loses one player and it totally changes the game. Remember, we have to earn the right to go wide. And what does that look like? How do we do that? We have to be running hard lines through the midfield, physicality, have a plan off our structured attack, and then communicate on the field of play. Let's take a look at that next one, Sean. Now here's 3 examples, one off scrum, one off line out, and one kicking option. Using questions to our athletes to pull the information from them, we've sent these clips to our provincial athletes during this downtime. So what are we trying to achieve from a set piece scrum? What's the reason this move did come off? How would you rate the back's ability to reload? So these are things that we'd ask our athletes to look at so that they'd gain a clearer understanding of what we're trying to do. Again, arrows. And if we were coaching here, we see right away, the defense gives a tweak of the scrum. So now the 9 has an impact on the defensive line because he could track 10. And the line, now while they did get the gain line, the defense did a good job covering. Did we reload well? Yes, we gave 2 options on each side. And then we could critique whether their depth was good, what their shape looked like. But this is how we would use the video to assist. Okay, so set piece line out, good lift, a plan. Again, having the skills and being able to recognize the situation. So you can say it was a bit of luck, as that observer did there, but we all know because they ran that hard line through the midfield and then brought the ball out the back, it brought that winger up. And then a player had the skill set, had the confidence to back themselves to put the ball through. Now we look at, again, an option from set piece. Ball going to first receiver, brings the winger up, cross kick to the sideline. So again, in this document, we're going to provide you with the resources and the structure in order to work on these aspects. So here, now we've taken that big picture of what we did in a game, and we're showing how it's used in a practice to practice it. So again, they don't just happen in the games. It's execution over and over in practice, developing core skills, and then working on the situations, painting small pictures at practice so that when we get into gameplay, we have the skills and we're able to skill perform. And how about that off crap ball? Again, just amazing stuff. Now we go on to the defensive side of the ball and core principles of play and phase play defense. Again, as always, player behavior is fueled by early and accurate communication. I can close my eyes at practice and tell if we're playing well in attack or well in defense by what it sounds like. Again, back in game, big, playing big on the field. We want to have people on their feet, 12, 13 up. We want to be squaring people up and going forward linked. So again, key phrases, square up and linked. In our type of play on defense, we have one type of tackle on the ball, and it's a dominant thigh-high tackle. End of story. Dominant thigh-high tackle. We've got the mindset that we want to get the ball back, and we always want to double where possible. Now that double though, as you'll see when we talk about defenders when they're working in a chain, we'd prefer it to come from the inside. We'll talk about that in a sec. Defense around the breakdown, common terminology, guard, shield, action, so that our athletes can communicate clearly on the field and then everybody knows their role. Defenders working in a chain, hunt, ball, jam. Again, ball, dominant thigh-high tackle, hunt, supporting on the double if possible, and then we're looking to create options on that double. Ripping the ball out, choking, meaning sealing it, ball to ground, trying to jackal it, or taking the meter. And then that player in the third player in that chain, that's when they have to make decisions. Do they engage? Do they fold around and communicate from the outside in and bring people with them? And then finally, when we're folding and when we're pressuring with flatline defense, are we blitzing because we've got equal numbers or more? Or are we down numbers and we have to jockey? And again, we work with our athletes, show them what this looks like, but again, they have seen them at practice. We've painted pictures, we've worked on 7v5, 7v3, and we have the ability to then implement it in gameplay. And then finally, phase play defense, kick to contest, aerial skills, or kick for territory, having an organized chase. Now we look at examples of elite players in gameplay. And again, this is what we're striving to achieve as coaches and as our athletes and our gameplay. So you'll see in this clip, the ability to reorganize, communicate, see what's in front of them, and then play out of it. Good line speed. Second person in, realized they weren't going to get the ball, immediately set up flat line. Double at the tackle, one in, everybody else on their feet, staying connected. Notice the winger came out around a little higher. Scott Hendry, who I know is on this, he picked up something from Bristol Bears, and they call that the gate on the outside from the guard shield action 1. And I really like that, either closing the gate or opening the gate when we're jockeying. Set piece defense, we'll talk about that in a second. 2 in on the tackle, realize that they've won the ball, get our shape, stay linked. Organizing, guard shield action, Double on the ball. Do we have a chance to get it? No. Back on our feet. Back in game. Communication. Isolated ball carrier. Man over. Back on our feet. Continuing to reorganize. Good spacing, communication, line speed. Now you'll see here, they recognize that they have extra men on the outside, a slight jockey to contain them, using the sideline as the extra defender. Double on the tackle, strip. Transition into attack. So good defense. Again, we talked at the beginning tonight about always applying pressure. They have the get the ball back mentality. And then they recognize an odd man situation on the right side and it turns into a try. All from good defense, being able to organize, pressure, and then play out of it. Now, when we look at structured defense off set piece, we're looking at scrum, line out, and restarts. What we're looking at here is every player on the field knowing exactly what their role is in that defense. Our big goal, contain the attack so that we can establish flat line defense. Right now, they might have 7 backs attacking 5. We want to get it to a situation where we have 14 people on our feet. Now, if we can control the gain line within 3 phases, now we can apply pressure. So they ran the exact same play coming up here. Now you'll notice having 2 players to the left, that's stretched 2 defenders over. They've isolated what they're going to do in attack. As soon as I saw this, I immediately said I wouldn't have defended it like this. And that's why. They had way too much defensive presence on the left-hand side, and then they paid for it. So very simply, and Aaron Carpenter in his defensive presentation with us last week, he said that at this level, it's not that they're not good defenders, it's that they don't have a good philosophy on how they're trying to defend. So their pattern in their defense was not successful for that situation. It's not that they all couldn't tackle. So as coaches, we have to make sure our athletes have an understanding of what we're trying to achieve, both offensively and defensively. Now we see this from line out. This plays a little slow, so I'm just going to talk through it while it goes. I'll let it play through the first time. So they end up scoring off that. Now, what we see here, and as they keep playing through it, they have 6 people in the line, and they have their hooker standing at the first receiver spot on defense. They've obviously watched video before because they make an adjustment. They think it's going to be a drive in the middle. But I want you to isolate that hooker who's out at the first receiver spot. When this ball goes out, he has no impact on the attacking first receiver. It was like they were playing a man short. Because of that, they also didn't have pressure at the back of the lineout on the first receiver. The back of the lineout did a good job of shutting down the 9, but we didn't get any pressure from the back of the lineout on first receiver. He had the time and space to utilize, and then what we'll see as it plays out, they end up pinching one in, and that creates the space on the outside. So good job here, but again, they didn't have a pattern that was for this situation. They do pressure the 9, but they don't get good pressure on the 10. The person who pressures the 10 really should have been on the second receiver in the backs. And it's a terrible ball on the back shoulder. They've got 4 in defense, but they haven't identified what the situation is. So they had more than enough defenders there, but 12 trees, as you'll see here, he pinches in. Now, if he had a shot hard on that man, maybe you'll give him the, say, okay, he made that decision, but it wasn't needed there. He just didn't do either. He didn't blitz, and then he didn't jockey. And then they end up scoring off. I want to remind you that everything that we have here presented, we're going to provide documentation for you, resources to back it up so that you'll be able to deliver this to your athletes. I'm now going to hand it over to Sean. So what we just looked at there is what I would say is big picture. Now we've got to look at the nuts and bolts of how we're going to achieve or make our athletes better with their nuts and bolts core skills so that we can then play more dynamic team rugby.
So yeah, like Con said, and like I alluded to at the beginning, we've kind of purposely built this document as kind of a funnel where, like Con said, we're starting out big picture with our general philosophy, getting into our principles, and now getting into the nuts and bolts, the KPIs, the core skills. This is what's going to allow our players to play the various types of systems and structures that we put in place. And there's obviously a lot of information on these slides. We've broken them down into the core skills as identified by Rugby Canada. And what we focused on is first the foundational core abilities. So for example, on this slide, what does it mean to run, pass, catch? Well, what we're looking for is to be able to execute those skills at various widths, at various depths, at various speeds, under different types of pressure, and the ability to make successful decision-making outcomes. So like Con said, presenting them with different pictures, building up their ability to identify and scan defenses, and then their ability to make the correct decision, whether it's a flat ball, a pull ball, taking the ball in, whatever it may be, dependent on the situation. So with these foundational core abilities, and what these really are universal abilities, whether you're playing a 1-3-3-1, a 2-4-2, whatever your shape or structure might be based on the athletes you have at your disposal, these foundational core abilities don't change. The various widths and depths you pass to might change, the various speeds, the various pressures they face might change, but they're still going to have to execute these skills in all different aspects. And so what we've done here is broken those down into KPIs, key performance indicators for each of these specific skills. So KPIs for the catch, KPIs for the transition. So as we make that catch and we're transitioning the ball across our body to execute the pass, and then KPIs for the pass itself. And these are taken, again, like we've said, from a variety of different sources, Rugby Canada, the various coaches involved in the national program, and really taking the ones that make that are really the best practices and the ones that execute common language. So we're trying to be consistent with the language that we're delivering these skills with. Again, like Con said, these are all going to be on the document that I send to you. But what I'll do is as I go through them, I'll leave them up for just a little bit. That way everybody can kind of take a quick glance. And if you have any questions, you can fire them through and then we can chat about them at the very end. So there's run, pass, catch. The next document here, so supporting running lines. So again, this one's simple, just KPIs for support lines in general. The next document, or the next piece here, so evasion and ball out of contact by the attacker. So as we're approaching the contact area, the collision area as the ball carrier, the different elements, the different foundational core abilities that we need to be able to execute. So being able to beat a defender one-on-one, using footwork to create a weak shoulder on the outside, accelerating through contact, fighting on your feet, buying time for your support players to get there and influence the contact area, and then creating separation from the defender or in the collision area by driving the other team off the ball. And then again, just some KPIs in order to actually be able to execute those core abilities. The next one here, so again, contact principles, but now we're looking at the roles and responsibilities or the core abilities of the support players. So what we refer to them as is the bullet and the clear, the B and C. in the contact area. So again, foundational core ability, early and accurate communication to influence the ball carrier's behavior. So as a support runner, identifying the situation in front of you and communicating to the ball carrier what their best action is, whether it's to take it in, to tip it on, whatever it might be. Scan, identify action, timing, anticipation, and targeting, winning that race. So winning the race to the breakdown when the ball carrier does hit the deck, or even before they've hit the deck, influencing the defense there, tackling the tackler, beating your opposite man to that area so we can win the ball and produce quick ball. And then they're threat focused, not ball focused. So the ball is always going to stay there if we do our job as the support runner and taking care of the threats over the ball. Here we've broken down the KPIs into the various roles involved in this. So the ball carrier's roles, the key performance indicator we're looking for the athlete or the player taking the ball into contact, the role of the bullet, and then the role of the clear. Tracking and tackling, so attacking the ball. So here we're looking at more obviously on the defensive side. So foundational core abilities, first and foremost, safe tackle technique, really ensuring that we're hammering the fundamentals into our athletes so that under pressure, they're able to execute a safe tackle and we're not worried about anything else. Ensuring that the defenders stay square to the attacker, so not opening up our hips and giving the attacker options. First up tackles to execute a dominant thigh high tackle. So making sure we're coming in low and really able to drive through the contact point and drive them behind the gain line. Ball defender to work in the power of three, which Con outlined in our principles of play, and staying connected as a unit of three. Defender will take away time and space. So again, really applying pressure as a defensive line and as an individual defender to the ball carrier to influence their behavior and their actions. And like always, we're always looking for early and accurate communication of threats. And this is broken down in KPIs into tracking. So as we're approaching the tackle, what we need to do in order to effectively execute that. And then as we've successfully tracked, now we're getting into the tackle, how we can break those skills down and work with our athletes on developing that area. Defending the contact area. So once we've made that tackle, what our roles and responsibilities become. So foundational core abilities, again, working as a power of three. So we've defended as a power of three, ball hunt, jam in the defensive line. Now when we go to deck, or when that the ball carrier is placed on the ground, how do our roles transition? What are our roles and responsibilities now? Again, first tackler, dominant thigh high tackle, assist tackler to attack the ball, third defender to scan and identify. They're really the key defender there. Making an accurate decision there is really going to influence the next phase and the amount of pressure you're going to be able to apply as a defensive line, depending on what that third defender does, whether they go in to attack the breakdown or whether they stay on their feet and allow us more width in defense. And then general things. So again, whether we poach, whether we fold, do we reset, getting back in the game, those are all the various decisions that go into it. And so again, here we've broken that down into the assists. So the hunt, what the inside defender is working to do and the KPIs for them there, as well as that third defender. So understanding what their role and responsibility is based on the picture that's being presented to them. Kicking game. So obviously something that's massive focus now in the Canadian game is trying to really upskill our kickers for those who are on the call with Kingsley. So foundational core abilities, ability to apply or relieve pressure in gameplay, effective kicking in and around the defenders, ability to find space with an attacking kick option, and the ability to apply pressure with an attacking kick option. And what we've done here is broken it down into the various types of kicks. So just general kicking, general fundamentals that we're looking to establish, and then breaking it down into the punt, your grubber, and your box kick. So that's just again, an overview. There's a ton of detail in those KPIs and a lot of them there to review. But what we've tried to do is create a document that you can look through, have this at home, have this on your notebook or on your laptop, where you can refer to these as you're planning a session, as you're developing your session, and really identifying the KPIs you want to stress at each point of the session. So when you're getting into your contact work, what are the KPIs you're going to stress and hammer to your athletes?
All right, coaches. So what we're going to do now So now we have an idea of how we want to play. We have the principles of what we want our team rugby to look like, and we have an understanding of the key performance indicators and the nuts and bolts core skills that we need to develop in our athletes. Now it's time to design our practices. This is, I was really lucky. A buddy of mine did a presentation and he fired it over to me, and I really liked this template. So this is what a general template of what a session design should look like. So what are our aims? And these should be your aims in every practice session. Detail in your preparation. So as a coach, you're going to put the effort in so that you have a really detailed plan. You want to maximize your time on task. So your athletes should be just chomping at the bit, working and developing, and there shouldn't be a lot of downtime. And we saw a couple presentations last week, one with Eddie Jones when he talked about coaching on the move. And this is where if you have clear communication on your team, where coaches can use small phrases or athletes can communicate with athletes using terminology that's clear, and then they know exactly what we want to achieve. Now, in this design, what we're looking at is technical development, skill development, and then to achieve skill performance. So if you look at this line across here, this is called the tempo of the session. And we know what that means. That means, is this a session where we might be doing a lot of teaching versus this might be a short, intense session where we're doing a lot of gameplay. So if we look at a low tempo session, we're going to do, no matter what session we're doing, we always go to the nuts and bolts. We have to do core skills. So before I continue, there's a lot of talk about gameplay in development as a coach in a team. Absolutely vital. But if our athletes don't possess the core skills, just the basic nuts and bolts core skills on how to execute the skill, then they can't develop strong gameplay. So don't ever forget that we always have to go to the nuts and bolts. We must work on core skill development of all phases of rugby every practice. Now at a low tempo session, we might introduce a new concept, reinforce past learnings, clarity in the detail. It might take a little bit longer. And this is where we're challenging the players with the why. What are we trying to achieve? Why are we doing it this way? Why are these decisions being made? And each coach will have their own way of coaching that you're comfortable with. Then when we move into like a middle tempo session, this is where, again, core skills, this is where we're doing some decision-making practices, maybe some 7v5s, 5v3s, game situation exercises. What will us attacking off both sides of the ruck look like? Let's work on a 4v3 attacking on one side of the ruck. Let's look what it looks like going on the strong side of the ruck. Clear principles fueling the outcomes we're trying to achieve. And on the next slide, I'll detail what this means. And then this next point is massive, coaches, reinforcing positive behavior. What does big look like on defense? How hard are they working? Are you winning the race there? Are you working like crazy on the ground for 3 seconds to produce the ball? Positive behaviors that have nothing to do with skill. And as we know, these are all the players that we love on our team, and they're invaluable. And then when we move to a high tempo session, this is where we've got development through games. Core skills, as always, small-sided games, building to 15 on 15. And the games are aligned with our philosophy and what we're trying to achieve. So this is a sample session design template. Now, when we review the session components, core skill development, every session, right? And this is where we're going to talk a little bit about skill zone and game zone. So in our skill zone, we might be working on core skills, and then the other half of the team is applying those skills in a game-like situation. Then we might switch them going back and forth if you have two coaches on your staff, one working on the skills you're trying to develop, one working on the gameplay. As always, consistent language and communication is vital in order to play very dynamic rugby on both sides of the ball. We want to reinforce positive behavior, and then we want to stress development through games. So we've got the core skills. We know how to apply them, and then we put them in games and we paint different pictures. Always asking the athletes why. What did you see, right? Clear principles with respect to the how we want to play. Clear outcomes that we're trying to achieve in our gameplay. These are the details. So here's an example. This is my favorite game with respect to offloading. So principles. Number one, you must have an intent to beat the man one-on-one. Evasion, not collision. We don't want the ball to go to the ground and the defense can set up flat line. We want to dominate every physical challenge, both mental and physically. Go hand to hand where possible. Keep the ball alive. If the ball does go to the ground, get it back off the ground and play as quickly as possible. Extra effort on the ground for 3 seconds. So you have a visual of that, what that should look like. What's our outcomes in our gameplay? We want to get through and around the back of defenders. We want to set a positive target zone and keep the ball off the floor. So we'd like to achieve offloads, but in our gameplay, if somebody bumps into somebody and then they don't work hard on the ground, it would be a turnover. If there's no footwork and I didn't think they attempted to work on the offload, it'd be a turnover. What would the gameplay look like? New Zealand speed touch. Attacking team must penetrate the defense by running, evading, passing, offloading. If the player hits a gap while being touched, they get 2 steps as a reward to offload. If they do not offload, they got to hit the floor, work for 3 seconds. And this is where they're working on their different components. Rolling, jackknife, hitting, turning, popping off the ground. Turnover occurs if they smash into a defender, fail to work on the ground, knock on or forward pass. So we're rewarding positive behavior. We have set principles and outcomes that we're trying to achieve in our gameplay. So the athletes know what we're trying to achieve, and then we work on the execution. Now, what we do is, depending on what we're working on, if it's a contact situation, I'll play a game called Rammy, and it might be 5v5, and we're just working on the contact area and what the speed zone looks like and what the bullet looks like and the clear and the next man making the decision and things like that. But we'd set our principles, what we were doing, what outcomes we were trying to achieve, and then we designed the game to achieve those outcomes, making sure that it's consistent language and communication and reinforcing positive behavior. As we stated, there could be a skill zone over to the side, working on footwork and offloads, and then it comes back into gameplay, and then we do rolling on the ground in the skill zone, and then we come back into the gameplay. So this is how we would design our sessions, and this is how we would implement our sessions. Now, this is the document that I think is your go-to. This is our core principles in the different areas of gameplay. These are what Sean and I feel are the big takeaways. So if I was a coach, I'd have this single page laminated, and then I'd tape it to my clipboard. And then I'd always come back to it. When we're doing our gameplay, when we're doing our skill zone, when we're doing our big-sided 15-15, and we're working on the bullet and clear out, this gives you a chance to go back and reinforce what we're trying to achieve. Core abilities at a glance is what we're calling it. So if you're a new coach or if you're an experienced coach, I think this one-page document is valuable. This is a sample session plan. Ryan Jones, one of our Rugby Ontario coaches, put this together with assistance from some other coaches. And then Sean and I manipulated it so that we have what we're trying to deliver. Nuts and bolts every practice, game and skill zone work. Setting the KPIs, setting what our goals are, what our principles are, and what outcomes we're trying to achieve, and then reminding ourselves of questions we want to ask our athletes. So this would be a very simple session template. Now, just before we go on to the next slide, and as coaches, I really want to stress this. I've always joked with everybody that knows me that I've never had an original thought in my life, but I'm awesome at stealing stuff. I've had really good friends that are high-level coaches that have provided resources and opportunities, and all we try to do is learn. This template and everything Sean and I have shown you today, these are the best practices that we've found around the world. And we've tried to put them in a Rugby Ontario document that delivers from the top down so that your club, high school can be better. Now, for me, these are your core resource sites. We're going to continue to work on our Rugby Ontario Coaches Corner. This past 6 weeks, we've never had so much professional development in our lives. We're pulling everything together, and we're going to streamline our Rugby Ontario Coaches Corner. And Sean's going to show you on the next couple of slides what that's going to look like. The RFU YouTube channel, Keep Your Boots On. If you click Game Zone, they have 48 different Game Zone sessions. If you click Nuts and Bolts Skill Zone, they have 35 different Skill Zone sessions. The rugby site, I've lived on for years. I think I've watched every video on the rugby site, and I continue to go back to them for references. You'll find coaches that you'll really relate to, and they'll drive what you're trying to deliver. World Rugby, absolutely, always state-of-the-art stuff there. And then some of these videos that I showed you today, Geraint Davies Rugby Coaching and Analysis, I've been pulling videos off there and using them as part of our professional development sessions with our Rugby Ontario athletes. Now, what this Rugby Ontario website is going to look like is it's going to become a one-stop menu of resources which support this document. Resources that will be categorized to support coaches so that you can design your sessions. And again, like right now, Sean and I work for Rugby Ontario. Everybody else on this call, you do this just for the love of the game. You have full-time jobs. If we can make your job easier to deliver quality content to your athletes, we feel that's a win-win. Pass it on to Sean now, and he's going to take you through what our website's going to look like.
So like Collins alluded to, we'll be making some adjustments to the website over the next few weeks and really putting together a catalog of all the different resources that we've compiled. Collins gone ahead and organized a lot of these videos and a lot of these resources into sections that reflect back on what we've already outlined in key principles and in nuts and bolts and core skills. So again, keeping with that funnel analogy, if we're going from big picture all the way down, not only through this document, will you able to look at the philosophies we're implementing, the core skills we're stressing, and how we're building those sessions through our templates and session plans. Now you have these resources as well to reference the specific drills or exercises or gameplays that we're implementing to achieve all of those things we've talked about from the jump. So the website, the Coaches Corner, will be moved on to its own tab. Right now, if you go on the Rugby Ontario website, it's under Team Ontario, Coaches Corner, and then it's all the content that we've produced ourselves. We're going to build that section out to be its own area, and then within that will be not only the content we've produced, but also other content that we've come across and that we're really fond of. So there'll be a section on the Rugby Canada National Core Support Documents for players and coaches, a ton of fantastic resources here that are great for coaches and players too. We'll break it down into section 1, so run, pass, catch. We've gone ahead and organized, so instead of having to sift through all the content and the various links, you can just click on here and it'll take you right to the specific video that we have in mind. All of these are hyperlinks, so when you get the PDF document, again, the website changes may not happen for a week or two, but once you get this document, these are all hyperlinks, so you can just jump right in and start navigating through there. Evasion ball through and out of contact, clear out and support the defending contact area. Again, we've just outlined all the different areas here. The big thing to note too, and what we've outlined is the majority of these documents are obviously free to use through our content on our website, as well as the RFU YouTube page, the GDD content on YouTube as well, who's phenomenal. The rugby site though, there is a subscription required, and we obviously understand that some coaches may have subscriptions or not, but what we've done and what's on at the very front end of this is a link to a 7-day free trial. So if you're not sure about the rugby site or you haven't had any experience with it, you can click there, get 7 days of access, and really just dive into it. And it's in our opinion, definitely worth the investment.
This is going to be very fluid. Literally, these are the ones that we've been able to put together for this presentation that were quite easy for us. I haven't even started diving into my computer and pulling out every awesome resource that we've stolen, that friends have given us. The rugby community's getting smaller and smaller and smaller now and tighter, and we're all working together, and we're gonna deliver it to you in this organized fashion. And I'm really excited about it. I have a friend in England at Welbeck College who works with the Leicester Tigers, and he sends me stuff, and every email he just says, "Con, sharing's caring." And I just laugh every time I read that phrase. Sharing's caring. It's not going to be us holding our best resources. We're putting everything out there, and then we're going to become such good coaches with Ontario athletes who are the best athletes in Canada. We're going to make them the best rugby players in Canada. A strong Ontario is a strong Canada.
And like Con said too, speaking to the fluidity of this section, we've already got one recommendation here in the chat. So, I mean, we definitely encourage you guys to share with us the resources you use or the sites that you frequent, and we can review it and put that out there as well, and really make it a community-driven document. And then again, here, just when you get this document, again, just attack patterns and defensive patterns. So again, like I said from the jump, really appreciate everybody on this call taking the time to join us and to sit and listen and learn throughout this presentation. Like Con said, sharing's caring. I think that's the best way to sum it up. And what we're really just trying to do is provide clarity and transparency. We don't want the Ontario Blues to be a closed shop. We want it to be as accessible as it can be to coaches at the high school and club level. And we want to drive the content. We want to be leading the charge and there for anybody who has questions or ideas or anything like that to reach out to, and we can certainly work together moving forward. In addition to just the fluidity of the resources, the document itself is going to be fluid moving forward as we continue to find best practices and work with and learn from leaders of the modern game. We'll continue to adjust our principles and continue to adjust what we're doing at the provincial level. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Hope you have a great night, and stay tuned for those resources coming up tomorrow.
All the best. Thanks, guys. Good night.